Well, Dr. Faisal Shuaib joins us this morning. He's Executive Director, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. That's the agency primarily responsible for ensuring all Nigerians are vaccinated. Thanks for joining us this morning, Dr. Shuaib. Well, I'd like to begin with the last comments of the WHO country director talking about discrimination of travelers. A number of people have been concerned about that one. I wonder if you could throw a little more light on that, because there are those who are saying, on the one hand, it is a human right or not to be vaccinated or not. And the fact that if you do not have a vaccine, a proof of vaccination, you can't travel. Restrictions are ongoing about that all over the place, coupled with the fact that some states are beginning to initiate some enforcement. Even some corporate organizations are making it mandatory for their staff to get vaccinated. So you want to let's begin with that. There will be a lot of frigidity or so, stuff like that. So speak to us about that one, about the fact that people must be vaccinated or it is an option.
So different countries are coming up with policies around vaccination, and it is the prerogative of those countries to assess where they are and what their laws say about vaccination, the rights of the individual versus the collective rights of the population. As we progress towards containing the COVID-19 pandemic, we will find a situation where countries will look at the impact of COVID-19 on their economy, on their livelihoods, and they are beginning to take decisions around how they can fast track the process of containing the pandemic. We know that vaccination is a valid tool. It is a tool that has been demonstrated to protect people from hospitalization, severe disease, and death. So different countries are beginning to look at ways of making sure that they approach and achieve herd immunity so that they can begin to go back to normal lives. I believe that this is the conversation that is going on now in Nigeria to see how we can make sure that on the one hand, we preserve the rights of the individual, but on the other hand, as government should do anywhere in the world, ensure that those who are vulnerable, those who are voiceless, also are protected in terms of their rights, and the fact that people's rights actually end when the rights of others begin.
Getting that information across, or getting that communication across to people, that must be quite a task. Against the background of what the head of Africa CDC also said concerning the same issue, where some countries are saying, look, if you get vaccinated with this particular vaccine or that vaccine, there's what they also call vaccine discrimination. I wonder what that is. How are we responding to that? Or do we have that challenge as well, or we don't?
So the head of the African CDC is spot on. The WHO has come out very clearly that this is probably too early a time for countries to be implementing vaccine passports, especially when there's inequity in the access to vaccines. So not all countries have the same level of access. So even with your resources, if you go to the open market, you're not going to be able to get some of these vaccines. So how do you justify a situation where countries, especially low and middle income countries, cannot buy the vaccines, and then you're using it as a criterion to allow people access your country? And in terms of trying to discriminate between vaccines, I don't believe that there's any country that has gotten it right. The UK definitely did not get it right by initially identifying only a few vaccines as being vaccines that are approved by the UK government as proof of vaccination. In the last couple of days, we've had conversations with the UK government, and my understanding is that they are, working back on those types of guidance. The vaccination being provided in Nigeria is recognized by the UK government. This was clearly communicated to the government. The UK government provides vaccines to our COVID-19 vaccination program. The UK government also procures vaccines from the same source, right? That is the AstraZeneca vaccine from the Serum Institute of India. So there's really no justification whatsoever for the UK government to say, vaccination, say, from Nigeria is not recognized. I believe this was an error on their part, and they are working back on those guidance that they provided initially. If you go back to their websites, I believe that they have made those corrections because you cannot donate vaccines to a country and then go back and say you don't recognize vaccination from those countries. I believe that there was a glitch somewhere, and they are in the process of correcting this glitch.
Was there any report by any Nigerian that they were turned back from the UK simply because of this reason?
Not that I'm aware of. So one thing that we also have to draw a distinction between is the protocols around arriving at the United Kingdom. This is why in our weekly press conferences we have clarified that because Nigeria was on the amber list based on criteria such as the number of COVID-19 cases that we have, it's a little bit different from the issue of vaccination. So as a Nigerian, because you're on the amber list of countries, if you go to the UK, you are expected, irrespective of your vaccination status, to self-isolate for 10 days while you do the PCR tests to ensure that you are negative. Pre-boarding PCR test, when you arrive on day 2 and on day 8, you are expected to actually do PCR tests. This is just very similar to what we expect of UK citizens. If UK citizens come to Nigeria, irrespective of their vaccination status, we also expect them to self-isolate for 7 days. This is what we call the principle of reciprocity, and we're having conversations around how practicable those types of protocols are. And I believe that in the next couple of days, the Presidential Steering Committee will be reviewing this protocol so that we also reduce the burden of people arriving in Nigeria, just as the burden that Nigerians face when they go abroad will also be lessened. We do not want COVID-19 and its economic impacts to continue to reverberate over the next few years just because we're not looking at the data and taking the right decisions around the kinds.
Oh dear.
Well, if I could just come in now, I hope we still have that connection with Dr. Shoaib. So there are two sides to this, the latest policy, which is meant to come into force on October the 4th by 4 a.m. in the UK. So there are two sides to it. There's a side of a kind of vaccines that are used across. Okay, so I hear we've lost connection. So we'll try to reconnect with Dr. Shoaib to continue this conversation, but it's going to be a big deal, really, because still going on the website of UK's agency that is responsible for vaccination, travel, and health issues, you see that they were quite specific about those policies that are meant to come into place from 4 a.m. October the 4th. And, it says that you will qualify as fully vaccinated if you are vaccinated either under an approved vaccination program in UK, Europe, USA, or UK vaccine program overseas. And then they went on to specify some other countries outside of those territory, countries like Australia and the rest. But I hear we have Dr. Faisal Shoaib back. So let me just take this to him and get his response. So two issues I was saying earlier. So one is the kind of vaccines used across the countries. And I know that for AstraZeneca, there are variants. You have the AstraZeneca Covishield, There's the AstraZeneca Vaxzevria. I hope I'm getting that correct. Even there's the Moderna Takeda and the rest. So there's a side of what kind of vaccines are used. And you hear that what is used in the UK is perhaps different from what is used in Nigeria, at least majority of Nigeria. And also there's a side of whether people are indeed getting those vaccines and consequently getting the vaccine certificate. So those are the two issues now that have been raised. But first, about the types of vaccines. The AstraZeneca vaccine, is it the Covishield, Vaxzevria? Which one do we have in Nigeria when you compare that to what you have in the UK?
So we have multiple varieties of the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's essentially the same AstraZeneca vaccine, but produced in different, factory sites. So the first batch of AstraZeneca vaccines that we received in Nigeria were actually those from the Serum Institute of India. And we got these vaccines through the COVAX facility. So that global platform to ensure that there are, reduced inequities in the availability of vaccines. So we got our vaccines from there, but we've also gotten our AstraZeneca vaccines from the UK, we've gotten from Canada, we've gotten, from France and Germany, or we'll be getting from France and Germany. We've already gotten communications. So the way it works really is that, say, for example, I'll use Nigeria as an example. If we were producing AstraZeneca vaccine, say, in a laboratory in Lagos and another in, say, Kano, NAFDAC can provide certification, for example, for the laboratory in the factory in Kano and say everything is perfect, it fits the standards. If we're exporting AstraZeneca vaccines, what regulatory entities will be looking at is whether this certification has been done for the Kano factory separately and distinctly from the Lagos factory. Even though it is from the same country, the different factories have to be certified differently. So the different AstraZeneca and this is part of the reason why these questions arise. But I also want to point it out that in actual fact, the COVAX facility has the support of the UK government, right? So if the UK government is supplying to Nigeria vaccines through the COVAX facility bilaterally or multilaterally through the COVAX facility, then it doesn't make any sense that the UK government is also saying that they would not recognize vaccines or vaccinations from Nigeria. This is why I am aware from our bilateral conversations that they recognize the vaccination that takes place in Nigeria. Again, the UK government has also procured vaccines from the same sources as those through which we got our vaccines. So I believe that they are in the process of reviewing their provisions. Again, I believe that there are conversations that are going on between, say, their regulatory agencies and their sort of travel departments and around the kinds of protocols that should be applied globally.
I'd like to also know the dangers, but essentially, just to be clear, you're saying that the Vaxzevria, the Covishield, they are the same AstraZeneca vaccines, essentially?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so what are the dangers, really? So imagine someone is fully vaccinated in Nigeria and travels to the UK, and we don't know what this new policy will be eventually. It's still quite unclear. But if that person is termed unvaccinated and then the person has to perhaps be vaccinated over again, what are the dangers in that, being fully vaccinated and just perhaps a few weeks after you're getting another jab and maybe a second jab, depending on the vaccine you take out? What are the dangers in that?
Clearly, it has potential effects on the health because what the manufacturers have done, what the clinical trials have shown, is the optimum number of doses that you need to get to ensure full protection, and also in a way that the vaccines, are safe for your body. Now, if you begin to get additional doses, then we do not have adequate information about what those types of doses will mean. Of course, what we're beginning to see, say from the United States, is that there will be a need for booster doses. For example, the US CDC has indicated that those who are 65 years and above will require, third doses, booster doses of the vaccines. So on the one hand, we will be cautious about, recommending additional doses beyond the 2 doses. We don't have adequate data, as it were, for example, that after taking AstraZeneca vaccines, that you do need a 3rd dose. All of those studies are still ongoing. So for now, it is not recommended. When it becomes recommended, then we can look at it, with the benefit of hindsight and say, look, was it okay to give additional doses after the first 2 doses? But I am yet to see a situation where somebody who has the vaccination card, has evidence of vaccination, is being asked to take additional doses of the vaccine. That is wrong, and we are engaging with the WHO and other bodies such as UNICEF and COVAX to say this is wrong, and we have to call out those countries who are implementing policies that are not based on science. It is not based on evidence. And just because some countries are developed countries, it doesn't mean that they have all of the information and that they're implementing all of the scientific information in a way that makes sense. There's sort of that balance between what the diplomats want to do and what the scientists want to do. We've seen this play out in the United States as well. So those types of political tensions between what people on the right are saying and what people on the left are saying. In any one country, you always find people who are more liberal and those who are more sort of conservative about the kinds of steps you should take in terms of restricting people coming to the country and then what those requirements should be. So it is a good thing that the United Kingdom has indicated that they are going to face the implementation of their policies. This is the first phase, and they'll be reviewing this phasing every 3 weeks to make sure that countries are adequately categorized. This is why they're moving from, for example, the 3 in the categories of red, amber, and green to now 2 categories. It's either you are green or you are not. So this is based on evidence that they are gathering, and we are working with the United Kingdom to see how this can be fast-tracked, especially because of our long, traditions, our culture, our collaborations, our partnerships with the United Kingdom of standing several decades.
It'll be interesting to see what further research we're doing here to buttress our own points, because you've said that what scientists want to do and what diplomats want to do are sometimes different. But I wanted to ask you, because we've seen, maybe 1 or 2 states, now introduce policies to the effect that people cannot come to work or go to work if they have not been inoculated. So I'm wondering, how aggressive would you say that that your agency has been in terms of rolling out vaccines to make it more accessible to the population? Because some people might argue that it might not really be a case of reluctance or resistance. It might just be the fact that, it's in the hospitals and people don't go there unless they're ill. So what else are we doing to ensure that the vaccines go to where the people go?
Yeah, that's a brilliant consideration. So the issue of vaccine mandates, we're going to be having these debates, I'm sure, for many years to come in terms of where do you draw the line between you providing facts. And the media has done an outstanding job of communicating to Nigerians. So this partnership between the Presidential Steering Committee and the media, has been very strong towards making sure that Nigerians get the correct information about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines and all of the processes that are involved in ensuring that we bring to Nigeria only vaccines that have been duly approved by WHO and approved in country by NAFDAC. But after providing all of this information, there are states that have lost so much money in terms of the impact on their economy. And you can see governors that are doing two things. In Ondo State and in Edo State, what the governors are doing is not just instituting vaccine mandates. I think not a lot is being said about the fact that these governors are also going out there, engaging with religious leaders, with traditional leaders, with community members, and trying to take the information out there that vaccines are safe, that these vaccines are effective, and they are the right tools to protect against COVID-19. But in addition to that, they are also beginning to introduce vaccine mandates. Of course, there's always going to be that debate about where the individual right is, and then where the right of others actually begin. That is a conversation that we will have. But for us at the Presidential Steering Committee, the Federal Ministry of Health, and the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, we said it before and we'll say it again. Our priority is to make sure that Nigerians access information so that they can take the right decisions about getting vaccinated. We do not want to make vaccines mandatory. However, there are instances where, for example, if people are educated and they've been provided with the information, then as government, it's a social responsibility to also protect those people who are vulnerable. And if people take decisions, for example, that are inimical to the health of their colleagues, their family members, it is the right of government to provide, clear directives in terms of how people that are vulnerable, the elderly, the sick among us, how do we protect them? This is why the chairman of the Presidential Steering Committee has, made it very clear that for federal government workers, you can take, that option of either one, getting vaccinated and showing your vaccination card, or on a weekly basis, you have to do the test, the PCR test to show that you are negative. This, for me, is not making vaccines mandatory. You do have a choice, right? If you don't want to take the vaccine, well, show that you are negative, right? All the government is trying to do is protect everybody so that an innocent person doesn't get sick because somebody else is, being careless, or somebody takes the decision not to take the vaccine. So we will see different complexions of this, but we're working with the Nigeria Governors Forum to make sure that there's a common understanding of where we need to be. But we cannot implement vaccine mandates unless and until we're sure that everybody has access to the vaccines, that everybody is able to go to a health facility and get these vaccines. And this is why even at the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency and the Federal Ministry of Health, we're looking at ways of decentralizing further, liberalizing vaccine access. So we started off with the phase one, where we provided vaccines to health workers, frontline workers, first responders, right? And then we're now at a point where we're beginning to open up more. We're now sending our teams to the private sector, corporate organizations, making sure that these corporate organizations will have a team that will be able to vaccinate them. But even beyond that, because we know that in some private entities, some corporate organizations, they have clinics and they have trained health personnel.
Dr. Schreib, we're going to find out further what other strategies you are employing to ensure that we take up the vaccines as quickly as possible. And when we also come back from this break, we will be having the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, Professor Babatunde Salako, to also join in on the conversation. So please stay with us.
Professor Babatunde Salako is a DG NIMR. He joins us on the program this morning. It's great to have you on the show. Well, now that we're discussing vaccines, whether or not we have enough vaccines. We don't have enough vaccines in Nigeria. It's not whether or not, clearly. I'd like to first ask you, how are we doing with vaccine development? Or are we still actively looking for or trying to develop a Nigerian COVID-19 vaccine? Professor Salako, if you can hear me, let me just take it again. I want to ask how far we have gone, or if we have stopped actively trying to develop a COVID-19 vaccine, a Nigerian COVID-19 vaccine. I know it was a talk earlier on, but it seems we've gone silent on that. So what's the state of our COVID-19 vaccine development in Nigeria? Well, Prof, the connection is quite sketchy, but we'll try to work on that, definitely, because we need to at least hear what's been happening with NIMA. Yes, we heard about the Lassa fever and the yellow fever test kit. We'll also like to hear about COVID. But let me take this back to Dr. Shoaib. I mean, our discussion before the break, you just saw what played out and what is playing out in Edo State. So some perhaps contradictions in this, some might say, or maybe areas that need to be cleared up. So on the one hand, we say that vaccination should not be a prerequisite to traveling abroad. And then you have state governments like Edo saying it's a prerequisite for working on site in the civil service. I mean, there's also the talk about, fine, you don't need to get vaccinated, but you need to prove that you don't have the virus. Essentially say you need to get tested perhaps weekly, as you have said. But we've seen that those who have been vaccinated as well have what you call breakthrough infections. So will they also need to be tested to ensure that they don't have the virus or breakthrough infections as well? So those are some of the contradictions I'd like you to address before we take this back to Prof.
Right. So what is happening in Edo State is a situation where the governor is showing leadership in terms of trying to fast track the process of ensuring that the citizens of Edo begin to build up back and stronger, after the COVID-19 pandemic. There is a lot of emphasis on the issue of vaccination cards, showing evidence of vaccination. But I also want to applaud the governor for the fact that he's also mobilizing the communities, right? Working with church leaders to get people to get vaccinated. I believe also that in that report, it was clear that the vaccination, presenting a vaccination card is a prerequisite to get to a government facility. Now, Edo State and indeed Ondo State are the two states that are currently consuming, in large numbers the vaccines. So what does this mean? This means that if states sort of provide an impetus and a motivation for people to get vaccinated, people actually are not strictly anti-vaccine. Some people are just sitting on the fence. They just need to be nudged a little bit and then they will get the vaccine, right? We do need to ramp up our vaccination coverage so that we can now, focus on getting our economy back together and then getting life back to normal. We do not at this point have the vaccines that will cater for everybody in the country. We hope that by the end of December, first quarter of 2022, we'll get additional vaccines, especially since we've procured vaccines, especially the J&J vaccine that is a single shot vaccine. It is laudable that government is taking steps to make sure that we increase the vaccination coverage. I believe that breakthrough infections are possible as shown by evidence. However, people who have breakthrough infections will not be required to get the testing. Once you have the vaccination card, the guidance, especially from countries such as France and United States that have the vaccine mandate, is that you will not be required to take the test. And a lot of people who have breakthrough infections actually do not even know that they have breakthrough infections because those infections usually are very mild, right, compared to when you are unvaccinated and you contract the COVID-19 virus.
If I get you, Claire, you're saying it's okay for the Edo State government to go on with that policy. But it's not okay for countries to say, well, vaccination is a prerequisite for travel or for entering our country and getting access to public spaces.
That's not precisely what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that at this point in time, there are global inequities in the supply of vaccines. So it is not fair for countries to start mandating that people cannot arrive their countries without vaccination, right? Because we don't even have adequate vaccines, especially in low and middle income countries. Further down the road, when these vaccines are available, then it will be the prerogative of those countries to take that decision. Now, in terms of what is happening in Edo, what so many other states are considering, I am not qualified in terms of law to provide an interpretation of what the Constitution says around where the rights of somebody ends and where the rights of others begins. This is why I have been very, very clear that at the Federal Ministry of Health, we are not mandating vaccination. What we are saying is that those conversations are going on, and we will have to look into it when we see that we have adequate vaccines. We cannot ask people to get the vaccination mandatorily when we don't have the vaccines to go around. But further down the road, those discussions will take place. Those discussions will take place all over Nigeria around, if you are in a house, for example, and say 50% of the people agree to take the vaccines that are safe and are effective to protect themselves and protect their loved ones. If there are a few people, say another 50% or 20% that say they will not take the vaccine, is it fair to everybody that they contract the virus and potentially infect somebody who is elderly, somebody who's over 65, and the person suffers severe disease and dies? That is a conversation for everybody. There's a moral element to it, there's an ethical element to it, and it's a conversation for everybody. It is not a conversation for just the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. But for us, we will continue to provide information about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines. And then we know that eventually Nigerians will take the right decision about getting vaccinated.
Well, Dr. Shaib, there's so much to unpack in all of the things that you're saying, because there's still the vaccine hesitancy. There's a lot of reluctance on the part of many people about that one. But, we'll talk a little further on that if we have enough time. Let's bring on again Professor Babatunde Salako, who is the Director General, Nigeria Institute of Medical Research, NIMA. I'm wondering, let's begin, Professor Salako, how you are taking on board all of the conversations around, and the confusion, if you like. Some people are also still wondering about that. There is now something that I don't think I ever heard before: vaccine discrimination, simply because they are coming from outside climes. And there's also been that conversation around us producing our own vaccines locally here in Nigeria. How far so far with that? Because there's been so much hype about the potential that we have.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by saying that there are two things we are talking about. We're talking about development of vaccines in Nigeria and production of vaccines in Nigeria. There are two different things. Development of vaccines has to do with laboratory experiment, where you try to develop your own local vaccines through any of the well-known vaccines method these days. We have the protein subunits type, you have the mRNA, you have the DNA, you have attenuated live virus. So what appears to be used these days are the modern ones, which can fast-track the development of the vaccine, the protein subunit, the mRNA, or the DNA. Now, what we have involved ourselves with is the protein subunit vaccines. where we design the proteins using the viral architecture that was sequenced in Nigeria. Basically, the sequence in Nigeria, the virus that was spreading in Nigeria. And we are able to come up with the design, but at the time we were doing the design, we were not able to produce the proteins in Nigeria. So we had to send the proteins abroad for production during the lockdown. So it took some time. It came back, and this has to be cloned in the laboratory, then purified, and then tested in animal. So we got as far as testing what we designed and produced in animal. And the result we got was not that encouraging because it didn't elicit adequate immunity from the animals. And that means that we have to go back to tweak that design and then resend it for production. But luckily, in the last 4 weeks, the MTN donated an oligosynthesizer machine to us, which can produce primers and probe that we use in the development of vaccines. And so we are back to that. However, between then and now, there are several vaccines around. And what we need to do is to procure them. As it is now, waiting for a local vaccine is going to cost a lot more than just buying vaccines that are available. So to us as a country, it may not be encouraging to seriously pursue a local vaccine development. One, if you develop a vaccine and it can elicit immune response from animals and humans, then you have to go through phases 1, 2, 3 trials. These phases cost a lot of money and they also require time to do. And now we are in pandemic, we need urgent solution. So we cannot wait for that length of time to be able to do that. The second one is producing vaccines in Nigeria. That is more amenable to doing within the country because all we need to do is to look back at our previous laboratory that has been producing vaccines, although it has become dilapidated these days. But government, and I believe Mayor and Baker in the last 1 year or so have come together to bring up this laboratory again. And government has also put in about 10 billion naira to support that laboratory. There are issues about the usage of the fund, but I'm aware that the laboratory is in the process of attracting maybe a modular laboratory that can produce COVID-19 vaccines. Because there are some eminent Nigerians that are trying to ensure that this is possible. So as we speak, Nigeria is being considered among South Africa, Senegal, and I believe Ghana for the possibility of producing COVID-19 vaccine. I'm not sure how far that arrangement has gone, but I'm aware that the Federal Ministry of Health is doing its best to ensure that this is possible. So the experience that we have had now is to prepare us for future outbreak so that when we have another outbreak, we may be able to come up with local vaccine sooner than what we have been able to do now.
It's interesting you talked about when and not if, so it's a certainty. But, you know, one of the things that a number of people have talked about, especially where it concerns research, is that because we have potentially huge data in the country which aren't being gathered. For instance, there are those who believe that because Nigeria has not been as seriously affected by this outbreak as many feared in the world, perhaps that's some sort of data gathering potential for us. There are those who believe that because though many people have been affected, it hasn't been as serious as it was feared in the world that would happen in Africa, including Nigeria, of course. So I'm wondering if there is anything being done to maybe, collect data from people who would volunteer, whatever it is that that researchers like such as yourself, medical researchers would need to find out why we have not been so adversely affected. What maybe there is some immune system, that is inherent in us that's not made this happen, and consequently, data that we can use to produce these vaccines, as you have talked about, because there are those who fear that even though it's taken so long in the past to produce vaccines, it hasn't taken so long now because the template is already there.
Yes, quite a number of reasons have been adduced, both within Africa and outside Africa, for the picture that we exhibited as Africans towards the infection of COVID-19 disease. Within the Institute, we are gathering data and to look specifically at the effect of calcium in relation to the sunlight environment that we have, determining the levels among those who are infected, those who had serious infection, and those who are not infected. Just to buttress the fact that maybe because of our sunny environment, because of our opportunity to have enough calcium, be able to develop hormones that are producing, helping the kidneys and the bones to produce calcium. This may perhaps be the reasons for Africans, amongst other things. We are looking at that. We are looking at malaria cross-reactivities between COVID and malaria, and to see whether immune produced by malaria over the past years, as Africans, most African nations have malaria endemic area, may also be the reasons why we don't have this. And of course, the fact that Africa being a tropical environment, there are a lot of infections around that our body has produced different types of antibodies to. All of these antibodies, or some of these antibodies, may in fact also be cross-reactive with the COVID-19 virus. So there are several reasons, and many of these reasons we are trying to look at within the data that we have gathered. So far, we haven't been able to analyze this. And because many of them are not new, we are taking our time to ensure that we have enough data to power exactly what we want to say, so that we can come up with a concrete evidence that supports this hypothesis. And when you look at vaccine coverage for Africa, is very low. And what that has brought, or reawakening in African leaders, is to let them know that they have to ensure that capacities are put in place for African scientists and researchers to be able to develop and produce their own vaccines. Because almost all the developed nations are now having vaccines for their countries, and most of the countries in Africa are yet to even vaccinate up to 2% of their population. So this is the reason why research must be funded, specifically for vaccine development for future outbreak. I believe Nigeria has realized this, and government has been trying to fund some of our activities in relation to this.
It will be interesting to know who some of your backers are in that regard, in terms of those who have shown interest in backing NIMA in the research that it is undertaking. But while you're also looking at developing homegrown vaccine, which you say is a very expensive venture, what body of knowledge are we contributing to what already exists in terms of those who have been vaccinated? So, for instance, we know that the vaccines we have been given have come from outside of the country. And we know that the vaccine was largely in the test phase. They say it takes about 2 years to fully certify a vaccine. And these vaccines have been given as a matter of emergency. Are we contributing, are we gathering data from those who have been vaccinated to see just what effect it has on them, and what body of knowledge we can contribute to the knowledge that already exists amongst those who have been vaccinated around the world?
Well, again, we are currently following up some cohort of people that have been vaccinated and completed the 2 doses. One, to determine the neutralizing antibody levels among them. 2, to also determine when these antibodies wanes, because it's been shown that when people develop natural infections, by between 3 to 9 months, some of them do lose the antibodies. So if you test them, you will not have any evidence that they have come across infection before if you use neutralizing antibody levels. There are efforts to also look at the cellular immune system, which may have more memories of the infection in the body. So those are 2 ways we are looking at it. And so far, we have followed up people up to about, I think, 10 months now. We've had about 2 or 3 samples taken, and we hope to follow them for about a year. Perhaps maybe in the next few months, we'll be doing an interim analysis of 6 months to actually see the response of the individual who has been vaccinated in terms of neutralizing antibodies. This has been shown before that the vaccines are efficacious and that they produce enough antibodies. But this is like a phase 4 kind of trial for us to determine if this is the same in Nigerians, and if the antibodies wanes, when exactly does it wane? Because if the antibodies given provided by the vaccines also wanes, then there may be a reason for booster doses. And I believe some countries are already talking about booster doses for certain age groups. It is because the ability of the vaccine to continue to produce neutralizing antibodies can wane. We are also looking at this. Now, we are also looking at the pharmacogenomics in this pharmacoeconomics of vaccine deployment. For example, Nigeria is yet to have enough doses for its people, and we are beginning to look at, should we try 50% of the full dose, or should we try 25% or 75% of the full dose of the vaccine that we have? Are we going to have the same response that the full dose will have? This is looking at the fractional doses of the current vaccines, such that if we are able to show that 50% of the vaccine currently being used will behave like the 100%, then one dose can vaccinate 2 people rather than 1 person. And that can cover a large number of people. Or if we are able to show that 25% can give the same response that 50 or 100% will give, then 1 dose will vaccinate 4 people. So that way we can rapidly cover a large population using smaller doses of vaccines. And this has been proven before using yellow fever at some point when there were outbreaks and there were not enough vaccines. And this was shown to be effective. So we wanted to see if at this time when we need vaccines to give our people and we don't have enough, maybe we could try this and look at the effect that this will have in terms of immunogenicity, that is eliciting neutralizing antibodies in the people, and then look at the coverage it has in terms of vaccine efficacy and effectiveness. Thank you.
I've just said now, because many people will be wondering if a smaller percentage of a dosage would do it. But then, hey, you're the scientist. We thank you very much for your time. But before we go, let me take Dr. Schweib's final comments on this. Speak to us very, very quickly, maybe in about 30 seconds, about maybe perhaps give some assurance as concern the reluctance of people, the hesitancy of people about taking this vaccine. What assurances can you give people now about that, especially against the background of what you said earlier? We don't have enough.
Right. The vaccination program in Nigeria is an effective vaccination program. It has been hailed by the World Health Organization as one of the most effective, in the world. We have very strong institutions that have learned from the polio eradication program, which was very, very effective and helped in the declaration of Nigeria as white polio virus free. The vaccines that we have in Nigeria have been duly certified. Over 300 million people vaccinated globally. We have already vaccinated over 4 million people in Nigeria, and we've had very few people that came down with serious side effects. This is the evidence that we need that these vaccines are safe and they are effective. So I'm calling on all Nigerians, to get off the borderline, not so sure if they should take the vaccine mentality. These vaccines are safe, they are effective, they will protect you from severe disease, from hospitalization and death. We need to build back our economy. We need to get back to living the way we do live. We have to be rational about the decisions we're taking. And I'm confident that over time, once we get adequate vaccines, Nigerians will go en masse and get vaccinated, not only in the government facilities, also in the private facilities. And
well, that compulsion is already starting in so many organizations already. But we have to thank you very much at this time. Dr. Faisal Schweib is Executive Director, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, as well as Professor Babatunde Salako, who is DG, Nigeria Institute of Medical Research. Now, my gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and thoughts this morning. And we wish you all the best. We're back after now to take on another issue today. Do stay with us.